The maid who has never been kissed is 3 months pregnant, and she can prove she has been locked in her room every night for 5 years. In a house full of dangerous men, one of them is lying. The question is, which one? And is the Mafia boss himself the answer? A billionaire crime lord who was told he is infertile stares at an ultrasound showing his genetic mark in a maid's womb. His wife is pale with terror. His most trusted men are sweating. The impossible just became the most dangerous truth in Chicago. If this is your first time on the channel, please hit the like button and subscribe for more interesting stories. And if you're watching without subscribing or leaving a comment, come on, that's not fair. Let's hear your own side of the story. Thank you and God bless. The gold clock in the hallway of the Moretti mansion struck midnight, but for Elena, the day was just beginning. She was the head maid, a girl who moved like a ghost through the massive marble halls. For 5 years, she had served the most dangerous man in Chicago, Dante Moretti. She cleaned his blood-stained shirts and polished his expensive shoes, never looking him in the eye. Dante was a man of iron and ice. His wife, Isabella, was a cruel woman who wore diamonds like armor. The house was silent and cold because there were no children. For 10 years, the doctors told Dante he was infertile, that he could never have an heir. He believed his bloodline was dead. One morning, while scrubbing the floors of the grand ballroom, Elena fainted. When she woke up in the infirmary, the house doctor looked at her with a face of pure horror. "Elena," the doctor whispered, his hands shaking, "you are 3 months pregnant." Elena's heart stopped. "That is impossible," she gasped, her voice trembling. "I have never been with a man. I have never even been kissed. I spend every night locked in my small room in the servants' wing." But the test didn't lie. The news spread through the mansion like a wildfire in a dry forest. By noon, Elena was dragged into the center of the dining hall. Dante Moretti sat at the head of the long table, his eyes like cold espresso. Beside him, Isabella was smiling, but it was the smile of a shark. Standing around them were Dante's most trusted men, Marco, the silent bodyguard, Victor, the charming driver, and Lucas, the young accountant. "Who did it?" Dante's voice was a low growl that made the windows rattle. He looked at his men, his eyes searching for a traitor. "Which one of you touched her? Which one of you put a bastard in my house?" "It wasn't me, boss," Marco said, his hand on his gun. "I wouldn't touch a maid," Victor sneered, looking at Elena's cheap uniform. Elena fell to her knees on the hard floor. "I swear on my life I have been with no one," she cried, tears blurring her vision. Dante stood up, looming over her like a shadow from hell. He didn't believe in miracles, he only believed in betrayal. He looked at the girl he thought was a nobody and saw a liar. "Since you won't tell me his name," Dante hissed, "you will be treated like the animal you are until the truth comes out." The news of Elena's impossible pregnancy didn't stay inside the dining hall. By the next morning, every servant, guard, and driver in the Moretti estate was whispering. To them, Elena was no longer the quiet, hard-working head maid. She was a liar and a traitor. Isabella, Dante's wife, stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching Elena scrub the front steps in the freezing rain. Isabella's eyes glinted with a cruel joy. She knew the secret she had kept for 10 years. She had paid a doctor a fortune to lie to Dante, telling him he was the one who was infertile. She never wanted a child to steal her spotlight or her inheritance. "Look at her," Isabella sneered to the passing guards. "The pure maid who claims a ghost got her pregnant. Since she loves secrets so much, let's see how she likes being the house entertainment." Isabella ordered the staff to move Elena's things out of the servants' wing. Her new room was a damp, windowless coal cellar under the kitchen. It smelled of dirt and mice. At dinner that night, Dante sat with his three most trusted men, Marco, Victor, and Lucas. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dante watched them closely, looking for a flinch, a smile, or a look of guilt. "One of you is lying to me," Dante said, his voice as sharp as a razor. "Elena says she has never been with a man, but science says someone in this house broke my rules. If I find out it was one of my own brothers, I won't just kill you, I'll make you wish you were never born." Marco, the bodyguard, stayed silent, his face like stone. Victor, the driver, laughed nervously and took a long drink of wine. Lucas, the accountant, kept his eyes on his plate, his fingers twitching. Suddenly, the kitchen doors swung open. Isabella had forced Elena to serve the meal while wearing a sign around her neck that read, "The Liar of the Mansion." Elena's face was beet red. Her hands shook so hard the plates rattled. As she reached to set a dish in front of Dante, her foot slipped on the polished floor. The hot soup splashed onto Dante's expensive silk tie. The room went deathly silent. Isabella gasped, pretending to be shocked. "You clumsy girl! First you dishonor this house, and now you attack my husband?" Dante didn't yell. He stood up slowly, the wet soup dripping down his chest. He grabbed Elena by the chin, forcing her to look into his dark, terrifying eyes. For a split second, a memory flashed in his mind, a memory of a dark room, the scent of lavender soap, and a soft voice crying out in the night. But he shook it off. It was just a dream. He had been told for a decade he could not have children. "Get out of my sight," he hissed, pushing her away. "From now on, you eat the scraps from the dog's bowls. If you won't give me the name of the father, you will suffer for him." Elena stumbled back into the shadows of the kitchen, clutching her stomach. She felt a strange warmth there, a tiny heartbeat that shouldn't exist. She knew she had been pure, but every night when she closed her eyes, she felt a heavy, familiar weight in her dreams, and she woke up feeling more tired than when she fell asleep. The basement was freezing, and the damp air made Elena's bones ache. Every morning she woke up with a strange, heavy feeling in her limbs, as if she had run a marathon in her sleep. She remembered going to bed at 9 p.m., locking her door, and then nothing. Just a thick, black void until the sun came up. Isabella made sure Elena had no rest. "If you can carry a bastard, you can carry these crates," Isabella barked, pointing to heavy boxes of wine arriving for a gala. Elena's stomach was still flat, but the morning sickness was hitting her like a physical blow. She felt a hand on her arm and flinched. It was Lucas, the young accountant. He was the quietest of Dante's men. He handed her a small piece of bread hidden in a napkin. "You look pale, Elena," he whispered, his eyes darting around to see if Marco or Victor were watching. "Why are you helping me?" Elena asked, her voice cracking. "Everyone thinks I'm a traitor." Lucas looked at the floor. "I do the books, Elena. I see things. I know that for the last 3 months, the security cameras in the servants' wing have been turned off for exactly 1 hour every night, between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Who turns them off?" Before Lucas could answer, a heavy shadow fell over them. Marco, the lead bodyguard, stood there with his arms crossed. He was a mountain of a man who never smiled. "Boss wants the books, Lucas. Move." Then he turned his cold gaze to Elena. "And you, back to the kitchen. The boss is losing his patience. He thinks one of us is the father, and he's looking for a reason to start shooting." That night, Dante couldn't sleep. He stood on his balcony looking out over the dark estate. He thought about the doctor's report from 10 years ago, the one Isabella had presented to him. Infertile. It was a word that had stripped him of his pride. He walked down the hallway toward his study, but stopped near the stairs. He smelled something. Lavender soap. It was the scent Elena used. He followed the smell toward the basement door. He saw Victor, the driver, standing near the entrance to the coal cellar. Victor was holding a flashlight and looking at the lock. "Victor," Dante's voice boomed through the silent house. "You're very interested in the cellar for a man who claims he wouldn't touch a maid." "I swear, boss, I was just—" "Go to bed," Dante hissed. "If I find you near her door again, I'll bury you under the driveway." Victor scrambled away, but Dante stayed. He looked at the wooden door. Deep down, a part of him felt a strange pull toward the girl inside, a pull he couldn't explain. He didn't know that 3 months ago he had started sleepwalking after taking the vitamin pills Isabella gave him every night, pills that were actually a strong sedative mixed with a drug that caused temporary memory loss. Inside the cellar, Elena laid on the dirt floor, clutching her stomach. She heard the footsteps outside her door stop, then fade away. She closed her eyes, and within minutes, the darkness took her. She didn't hear the door creak open. She didn't see the tall, dark figure enter the room and sit beside her, watching her sleep with a look of confused longing. The humiliation of the liar of the mansion reached a breaking point. Isabella, determined to prove Elena was carrying a low-life child, called a high-priced private doctor to the estate. She wanted a DNA test, but the baby was too young. Instead, she demanded a high-tech ultrasound to look for any signs of the father's identity. In the middle of the grand living room, Elena was forced to lie on a cold table while the staff watched. Dante stood by the fireplace, his face a mask of stone, though his heart hammered against his ribs. He hated himself for the way his eyes kept drifting to Elena's pale, tired face. The doctor moved the scanner over Elena's stomach. Suddenly, a grainy image appeared on the large monitor. The room went silent. The baby was small, but its heart was beating with a powerful, rhythmic thud. "Wait," the doctor whispered, leaning closer to the screen. "This is extremely rare." "What is it?" Isabella snapped, hoping for news of a deformity she could mock. The doctor pointed to the baby's tiny, forming hand. "The fetus has a rare bone structure in the thumb and a specific shadow on the heart valve. It's a genetic trait called the lion's grip. It only appears in one specific bloodline in all of Europe." Dante froze. He knew that name. His father had it. His grandfather had it. It was the physical mark of the Moretti men. Isabella's face turned white. She quickly stepped forward. "That's impossible. This doctor is a fool. Elena probably drugged him to say that." She turned to Marco. "Throw this doctor out. He's clearly been bribed." Marco hesitated, looking at Dante. Dante didn't move. He was staring at the screen, at the tiny life that carried a mark he was told he could never pass on. "Boss?" Victor asked, nervously. Victor had been acting strange all morning, sweating and checking his phone. "Maybe the maid found someone else with that mark. A cousin? A distant relative?" Dante turned his gaze to Victor. The air in the room turned freezing. "There are no other Moretti men left, Victor. Only me." Dante walked over to Elena. For the first time, he didn't look at her with hate. He looked at her with a terrifying curiosity. He reached out and touched the side of her face. Elena flinched, expecting a blow, but his hand was steady. "Tell me again, Elena," Dante whispered. "Who were you with?" "No one, Mr. Moretti," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "I wake up with bruises on my arms and my head spinning, but I have never seen a man in my room, I swear it." Dante's mind raced. Bruises? A spinning head? He looked at the vitamins Isabella made him take every night. He looked at the way Isabella was now shaking with rage. "Marco," Dante commanded, his voice a low, deadly rumble, "lock the gates. No one leaves this mansion. Not the guards, not the drivers, and especially not the accountant. I want to know why my infertile blood is growing inside a maid who says she's a virgin." Isabella felt the floor shifting beneath her. Her 10-year lie was cracking, but she wasn't done yet. That night, she crept into the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of cleaning acid. If she couldn't stop the truth, she would stop the baby. The tension in the Moretti mansion was like a wire ready to snap. Dante could not stop thinking about the lion's grip mark on the ultrasound. He went to his private study and found the bottle of vitamins Isabella gave him every night. His mind flashed back to the poor Maid story he once heard, where a woman was trapped by powerful men. He called a trusted chemist outside the Mafia circle. "Tell me what is in these," Dante commanded. While he waited, Isabella was busy in the kitchen. Her face was twisted with hate. She poured a glass of milk for Elena, but she stirred in a clear, burning liquid. "Take this to the cellar," Isabella ordered a young laundry girl. "Tell Elena it is a gift from me to show I am sorry." In the cellar, Elena was shivering. She felt like a nobody waitress bleeding out on a cold floor. When the laundry girl brought the milk, Elena reached for it, her throat parched. But just as the glass touched her lips, the door burst open. It was Lucas, the accountant. He slapped the glass out of her hand. It shattered, and the milk hissed as it ate into the stone floor. "It's poison!" Lucas yelled. He looked at Elena, his eyes full of fear. "Isabella is trying to kill the evidence. She knows what I found in the security logs." Suddenly, Dante appeared in the doorway. He held a lab report in his hand. His eyes were red with fury. "The vitamins were sedatives, Isabella," he roared, his voice echoing through the halls. "They didn't make me infertile. They made me a sleepwalker who couldn't remember his own actions." He looked at Elena, then at his wife who had followed him down. "For 10 years you lied. You told me the world didn't go black because of my health, but because of your needles and pills." Dante grabbed Isabella by the arm. "You treated this girl like she was invisible, like a ghost." He turned to his men, Marco, Victor, and Lucas. "One of you helped her. One of you turned off those cameras so I could walk into this cellar in a trance and never know what I was doing." The mystery of who impregnated the maid was solved, but the danger was just starting. Dante realized he had been the one stalking through his own home like a predator. "She is not a servant anymore," Dante announced, echoing a command that silenced the room. "She is the mother of my heir, and anyone who touched that milk will wish they had taken a bullet instead." The change in the mansion was overnight and terrifying. Dante did not just move Elena out of the coal cellar, he carried her himself in front of all the servants up the grand marble staircase to the master suite. This was the room Isabella had occupied for a decade. Now, Isabella was locked in the very basement room she had used to torture Elena. "This is your home now," Dante said, placing Elena on the silk sheet. His voice was no longer cold, but it was still full of a dark intensity. "No one touches you. No one speaks to you unless they are bowing." But Elena was not happy. She looked at the gold leaf ceiling and felt like a bird in a more expensive cage. "You drugged me, Mr. Moretti," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You took from me the one thing I had, my purity, without me even knowing. How am I supposed to feel safe?" Dante flinched. The devil of Chicago had no answer. He knew he was the monster in her story, even if he had been a puppet moved by Isabella's strings. Downstairs, the atmosphere was like a graveyard. Dante called his 3 most trusted men into the soundproof basement. Marco, Victor, and Lucas stood in a line. "The security cameras," Dante began, pacing like a tiger. "Lucas told me they were turned off every night. He says he found the logs. But Lucas, why did you wait until the poison was at her lips to tell me?" Lucas turned pale. "I was scared, boss. Isabella threatened to have me erased if I spoke up." Dante turned to Victor, the driver. "And you, Victor, I caught you at her door with a flashlight. Were you checking the lock, or were you making sure I got inside safely so the plan could continue?" Victor started to sweat. I was just following orders, boss. Isabella said it was for your own good. She said you needed to release your stress." Dante's fist collided with Victor's jaw, sending him crashing into a table. "You let me violate a girl who had nothing. You watched me walk into that room like a ghost, and you did nothing." Suddenly, Marco, the silent bodyguard, spoke up. "It wasn't just Isabella, boss. There is someone else. Someone who has been paying Victor and Lucas to keep their mouths shut. Someone who wanted a bastard heir to be born so they could kidnap it and rule the Moretti Empire through a child." Dante froze. "Who?" Before Marco could answer, the lights in the mansion flickered and died. A loud explosion rocked the front gates. The mystery of the pregnancy was out, and now the enemies of the Moretti family were coming to claim the miracle baby. The explosion at the front gates felt like an earthquake. The massive crystal chandeliers in the master suite swayed and groaned. Elena screamed, clutching her stomach as the glass in the windows shattered into a million diamonds. Dante didn't hesitate. He covered Elena's body with his own, shielding her from the flying glass. "Stay down," he roared. Outside, the sound of heavy gunfire ripped through the night. Black SUVs had rammed through the gates, and men in masks were swarming the lawn. These weren't just common thugs. They moved with military precision. "Marco, status," Dante barked into his radio. "It's a full-scale hit, boss." Marco's voice crackled through the static. "The Valenti family. They heard the rumors about the baby. They want to end the Moretti line tonight while the mansion is in chaos." Dante looked at Elena. She was terrified, her face pale, but her eyes were locked on his. For the first time, he saw her not as a maid or a victim, but as the mother of his child. He reached into his waistband and pulled out a silver handgun, handing it to her. "Do you know how to use this?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "Point and pull. Don't let anyone touch you." Dante's voice a deadly calm. "I have to lead them away from this room. If I don't come back, Lucas knows the code to the secret tunnel behind the wardrobe." Dante sprinted into the hallway, joining Marco and his men. The mansion, once a place of luxury, was now a war zone. Smoke filled the air, smelling of sulfur and expensive perfume. In the basement, Isabella was screaming. As the guards ran to the front lines, she saw her chance. She grabbed a heavy brass lamp and smashed the lock on her cellar door. She didn't want to escape. She wanted revenge. She knew the secret tunnels better than anyone. While Dante was busy fighting the Valentis at the front door, Isabella was crawling through the walls toward the master suite. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Victor, the driver, was seen talking into a burner phone. "The boss is distracted. The girl is alone in the bedroom. Move in now." Elena sat on the floor of the master suite, the heavy gun shaking in her hands. She heard a scratching sound coming from inside the wall. A small wooden panel near the floor slid open. A pair of crazed, bloodshot eyes looked out at her. "You took my life, you little rat. Now I take yours." The master suite felt like a tomb as Isabella's eyes stared through the gap in the wall. Elena's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the heavy silver gun. She remembered the silent witness stories she had seen on the news, where the person you trust most is the one holding the knife. "You think he wants you?" Isabella's voice was a jagged rasp from inside the wall. "Dante doesn't love a maid. He only wants the heir. Once that baby is born, he will toss you back into the dirt where I found you." Elena backed away toward the vanity table. Her hip hit a small decorative jewelry box, knocking it over. Out rolled a tiny black electronic device. It wasn't jewelry. It was a hidden camera, no bigger than a button. Suddenly, the bedroom door kicked open. It wasn't Isabella, it was Victor, the driver. He wasn't carrying a weapon, he was carrying a laptop. "Elena, listen to me," Victor said, his breath coming in fast pants. "The Valentis are in the foyer. Dante is pinned down, but I found something on the internal server. I know who was really turning off the cameras every night." Elena pointed the gun at him. "Stay back. Dante said you were at my door. He said you were the one who helped Isabella." "I was at your door to protect you," Victor yelled, holding up the laptop screen. "Look!" Elena glanced at the screen. It was grainy night vision footage from 3 months ago. The timestamp read 2:15 a.m. In the video, a man walked down the servants' hallway. It wasn't Dante sleepwalking. It was a man wearing a mask, but he had a very specific limp, an old injury from a bullet wound. It was Marco, the most trusted bodyguard. The video showed Marco opening Elena's door with a master key. A second later, Isabella appeared in the frame, handing Marco a syringe. They weren't just drugging Dante, they were drugging Elena too, making sure she stayed unconscious while they staged the miracle pregnancy to look like Dante's doing. "Why?" Elena whispered, her head spinning. "Because Marco is working for the Valentis," Victor explained. "They wanted Dante to believe he had an heir so they could kidnap both of you and force Dante to sign over the entire Chicago territory as a ransom." Just then, the wall panel fully gave way. Isabella scrambled out, her fingernails broken and bloody. But she wasn't looking at Elena. She looked at Victor with pure terror. "You fool!" Isabella screamed. "Marco is right behind you!" A heavy silencer coughed. Thwip, thwip, and Victor slumped to the floor, the laptop crashing beside him. Marco stood in the doorway, his face as cold as a winter grave. He didn't look like a protector anymore. He looked like a kingmaker. "The driver was always too smart for his own good," Marco said, stepping over Victor's body. He looked at Elena's stomach. "The Valenti family is waiting downstairs. They don't care if you're a maid or a queen. They just want the bloodline." The mansion's sirens screamed like dying animals. Red lights pulsed against the garage walls as the countdown hit 30 seconds. Elena's teeth sank deep into Marco's hand. He roared, his grip loosening for just a heartbeat. In that second, Elena didn't run away. She grabbed the heavy laptop Victor had dropped and slammed it into Marco's face with every ounce of strength she had left. "Now, Dante!" she screamed. Dante moved like lightning. He didn't use the tire iron. He reached through the shattered window and dragged Marco out of the car by his throat. "You touched what was mine," Dante hissed, his eyes reflecting the red emergency lights. He delivered a blow that silenced the traitor forever. "The car! Get in!" Dante scooped Elena up and threw her into his silver SUV. He slammed the gas just as the first floor of the mansion began to buckle. Boom! The explosion wasn't meant to kill them. It was a controlled demolition Lucas had set to trap the Valenti soldiers inside the tunnels. As the Moretti mansion crumbled into a mountain of marble and dust, Dante's car soared out of the gates and into the rainy Chicago night. 2 days later, the world was different. Elena woke up in a private hospital wing. The walls weren't damp stone. They were covered in soft white silk. Dante sat by her bed, his hand resting on her stomach. He looked tired, but for the first time, the ice in his eyes had melted. "Lucas found the rest of the files," Dante said softly. "The missing nights weren't a miracle, Elena. Isabella and Marco had been using a secret medical team. They didn't just drug us, they were trying to create a designer heir with my DNA while I was sedated, so they could control the future of the family. They chose you because you were a nobody, someone they thought would never fight back." He leaned in, his forehead touching hers. "They were wrong. You are the strongest person I have ever met." "And Isabella?" Elena asked. "She is alive," Dante said, his voice turning cold again. "But she will spend the rest of her life in the same coal cellar she put you in. She will see what it's like to be invisible." Dante stood up and opened the door. Standing in the hallway were the remaining Moretti soldiers, nearly 100 men. As one, they bowed their heads. "The mansion is being rebuilt," Dante announced to the room, "but it will no longer be a fortress of secrets. It will be a home, and Elena will not be the head maid." He turned to Elena and placed a ring on her finger, a diamond the size of a bird's egg, shaped like a lion's head. "You were the maid who swore she was pure," Dante whispered so only she could hear. "And you were right. You are the only pure thing in this city. From today, you are the Queen of Chicago." Elena looked at the men bowing to her, then at the man who had once been her nightmare and now her protector. She realized that the impossible pregnancy hadn't just brought a child into the world, it had brought a monster back to life and given a maid the power to rule an empire.
If you like this story, please leave a like and drop a comment. Also, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next interesting story. We wish everybody watching a good health and light in our path.